Hallelujah, shalom, brothers and sisters. All right, so I was looking through the Dead Sea Scrolls and the Signs of the Mashiach 4Q521. It looks very interesting. So, all right, the Signs of the Mashiach 4Q521. So these are parallels between a new Dead Sea Scroll fragment 4Q521 and the early New Testament gospel tradition. Alright, so here we go. Praise Yah. Thank you, Father. Give us a rightful understanding to grow in your love. And one of the more intriguing of the newly released Dead Sea Scrolls is a fragment now titled Messianic Apocalypse. This text contains three rather striking features that are of particular significance for comparing the apocalypse beliefs and expectations of the Qumran community with the emerging early Christians movement. First, the text speaks of a single Mashiach figure who will rule heaven and earth. Second, it mentions in the clearest language the expectation of the resurrection of the dead during the time of Mashiach. And third, and perhaps most important for students of the New Testament, it contains an exact verbal parallel with the Gospel of Matthew and Luke for identifying of the signs of the Mashiach. First, a translation of the fragment itself. The heavens and the earth will listen to his Mashiach, and none therein will stray from the commandments of the holy ones. Seekers of Yahuwah, strengthen yourselves in his service. All you hopeful in your heart, will you not find Yahuwah in this? For Yahuwah will consider the pious Hasidim and call the righteous by name. Over the poor his spirit will hover and will renew the faithful and with his power, and he will glorify the pious one, the throne of the eternal kingdom. He who liberates the captives, restores sight to the blind, straightens the bent, and forever I will cleave to the hopeful, and in his mercy, and the fruit, will not be delayed for anyone. And Yahuwah will accomplish glorious things which have never been been asked. He, for he will heal the wounded and revive the dead and bring good news to the poor. He will lead the uprooted and knowledge, and smoke. Okay, then the early Christians obviously focused on a single Mashiach or Christ, a descendant of King David, whom they identified as Jesus of Nazareth, Yahushua of Nazareth. Mark 8:27-30, Acts 2:36. They clearly saw him as Elohim's cosmic agent, who would return in power and glory to rule heaven and earth. Mark 14:61-62, 13:26-27. They expected that the entire cosmos would come under subjection to him. Phil 2:9-10, 1 Corinthians 15:24-28. They remembered him as one who had power over the demonic spirits, over disease and death, and even over the forces of nature. This exalted view of Yahushua is well summed up in the Markan version of the disciples. Exclamation: when he calms a storm on the Sea of Galilee, who, when in this, that even the wind and the sea obey him. Mark 4:35-41. But like those at Qumran, they associated other special figures and groups with the age of Hamashiach. John the Baptist was the Aaronic priesthood and was revered as a returned Elijah, a sure sign that the end was near. Mark 9:9-13, Malachi 4:5, Hebrews 3:23. The 12 apostles were expected to sit on thrones over the regathered 12 tribes of Yashrael in the coming messianic rule. Matthew 19:28. The followers of Yahushua, referred to as the elect or saints, were expecting to rule over the Gentile nations and even judge angels. 1 Corinthians 6:1-4. In line 11, we have a clear reference to the resurrection of the dead. Why is this so significant? Much ink has been spilled over the past few decades discussing whether or not the people who composed the scrolls believed in distinctively Jewish doctrine of the resurrection of the dead. We know that various Jewish groups during the Second Temple period disputed over this doctrine of the afterlife. The first reference to the idea of the dead being raised occurs only in very late portions of the Hebrew Bible. Daniel 12:1-3. It was a doctrine that was emerging in certain Jewish circles from the 2nd century BCE down through the 1st century CE. We see evidence of the dispute reflected in the Apocrypha and in the New Testament. 2nd Maccabees 12:43-45, 15:11-16, and Mark 12:18-27, Acts 23:6-10. Obviously, for the early Christians, faith in the resurrection of Yahushua, and indeed of all humankind at the end of days was a cardinal doctrine. 1 Corinthians 15:12, Acts 24:15. But what about those at Qumran? Ges Vermes, in early editions of his widely circulated book of the Dead Sea Scrolls in English, says that the scrolls never clearly mentioned the idea and concluded that resurrection played no part in their eschatology. His view is commonly reflected in many standard Qumran studies. Of course, Vermes and other scholars had no access to this text until it was published in Biblical Archaeology Review in 1992. We now have an ambiguous statement that raising the dead was one of the key expectations of the Messianic age in this community. Luke 11. Of this text also contains another highly striking feature. Indeed, it appears to be the closest and most direct linguistic parallel to a New Testament the New Testament text that we have yet discovered. The line reads, "For he will heal the wounded, resurrect the dead, and proclaim glad tidings to the poor." In both Matthew and Luke, we read of a deputation that John the Baptist sends to Yahushua while John is imprisoned. John's disciples ask Yahushua, "Are you the coming one, or do we look for another?" The story is thus tightly framed around the question of Mashiach identity. What will the sign of the true Mashiach be? Yahushua answered, "Go and report to John that you have seen and heard, the blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear. The dead are raised up, the poor have the glad tidings preached to them." Luke 7:22-23 and Matthew 11:4-5. This reply is cast in the style of a precise formula. It reflects a very early Christian expectation of the signs of the Messianic age, and the marks for identification of the Messiah. One identification that we have here, a very early Christian tradition, is that these passages from Luke and Matthew come from the source scholars have designated as Q, from the German word Quelle, meaning source. According to most New Testament scholars, Q was a collection of the sayings of Yahushua, somewhat like the Gospel of Thomas in Genera, which was compiled in the middle of the 1st century, but before our finished Gospel, Matthew, Mark, and Luke were written. Whoa! That's interesting. Okay, the phrase at the end of the line 11 about proclaiming glad tidings to the poor is a direct quotation from Isaiah 61:1, which tells of an anointed one, Mashiach, who will work various signs before the day of Yahuwah. This passage is quite important in the Gospel of Luke. In fact, he highlights it as the inauguration of the Mashiach mission of Yahushua according to Luke. It is this very verse from Isaiah which Yahushua reads and claims to fulfill in his hometown synagogue of Nazareth. However, what is most noteworthy is that Yeshayahu, Isaiah 61:1, says nothing about the anointed one raising the dead. Indeed, the entire Hebrew Bible there is nothing about a Mashiach figure raising the dead. Yet, when we turn to the Q source, which Luke and Matthew quote regarding the signs of the Mashiach, we find the two phrases linked. The dead are raised up, the poor have the glad tidings preached to them, precisely as we have in our Qumran text. Luke makes more than passing use of this notion of the resurrection of the dead as a sign of the age of the Mashiach. In the two places he quotes Isaiah 61:1, he also mentions specific case of resurrection of the dead, as Elijah once raised the son of the widow. Yahushua now raises the son of the widow from Nain. Luke 4:26, 7:11 through 17. This is hardly accidental, as the closed juxtaposition of the text makes clear. It is also significant that the section of the Q source is dealing with traditions shared between the community of John the Baptist and that of the early followers of Yahushua. The close connection between John the Baptist and the community that produced the scrolls have been pointed out by many scholars, though this Dead Sea Scroll fragment coupled with the early Q source of the Gospels, we are taken back to the very early common tradition within Palestine and Judaism regarding the signs of the Mashiach. We are in the better position to speak of the common expectation of a variety of interrelated apocalyptic sectarian Baptist groups which have fled to the wilderness to prepare the way of Yahuwah. Isaiah 43, Luke 3:4, 1 QS 8:9. They appear to share a specific set of expectations, and they draw in strikingly similar ways upon a common core of prophetic texts from the Hebrew Bible and related Jewish literature. Of course, this fragment alone does not settle our attempt to identify the people of the scrolls, whether they should be labeled as Essenes, Sadducees, Zealots, Pharisees, Nazarenes, Ebionites, or a unique blend of their own amalgamation. However, the text does provide a most direct and significant example of a common messianic hope among the followers of John the Baptist, Yahushua, and the teacher of righteousness. How interesting was that? For a fuller and more technical treatment of this text, see James Tabor and Michael Wise, 4Q521, on resurrection and the synoptic gospel tradition. A preliminary study in Qumran Questions, edited by James Charlesworth, Sheffield Academic Press, 1995, pp. 161 to 163. Alright, brothers and sisters, how interesting was that? Very. Shalom!